Hey friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm finally gonna show you what I'm destashing from my collection. Well, some of what I'm destashing because there is a lot, but this video is mainly gonna cover the 4 boutique brands, Cirque, Holo Taco, Mooncat, and ILNP. As you know, I do receive PR from these brands, and with how often they do their releases, I end up running out of room pretty quickly in my helmers. And even though the majority of these are really beautiful polishes or they have really nice formulas, I just end up not really reaching for them, so they end up just taking up valuable space in my helmers, and I pretty much only felt obligated to keep them for the sake of comparisons. But since I did some swatch sticks of all of the shades I'm getting rid of, I at least now have a tangible way to do the comparisons in the future, because it really does make a difference when you see the actual polish like in real life versus seeing a photo next to a video or even 2 videos next to each other. So that definitely makes me feel a lot better about getting rid of some of these. So yeah, I will talk a little bit more about this whole destash thing at the end of the video. For now, let's just get into the swatches. So I'm starting with Holo Taco since that's the brand that I have the least of, I think. This first polish is Wireless Mode, which was from that lighter multi-chromes collection. I'm just blanking on the name of it right now. This one is definitely very pretty and it has a nice formula. It just was a lot more sheer than I was expecting it to be. I normally don't have a problem with sheer polishes, but this just wasn't doing it for me, and KB Shimmer's Splash Talking is basically a good color dupe with a more opaque formula. Then I have Twice in a Blue Moon, which was from their Magnetics collection, and this is actually the only magnetic I'm gonna get rid of, which might be surprising because I know a lot of people did not like that collection, so I'm definitely in the minority where I did, and this one is another beautiful shade. The problem for me is that this one just really smells so funky. I know that can be common with certain blue polishes, but I just have other dark blue magnetics that don't have a bad smell to them, so this is my least favorite. And the last Holo Taco that I have is Choco-Holo from that one Holiday Glitters collection. This is one of the few Holo Taco shades that I just really don't like, which is upsetting because I was hoping that I was gonna like this one. I love brown polishes, especially deep ones, but I feel like this one just has a little too much yellow in it for me. I don't know if it's just the gold glitters, but it just isn't what I want when I'm wearing it. So I'm finally gonna be letting this one go. It took me a while to get to this point because I just wanted to have the complete collection, but what does it even matter if I'm not wearing every single shade, you know? Moving on to ILNP, I really don't have many. The first one that I have here is Juliette, which I kind of feel bad destashing because this is definitely a very popular shade, but my bottle, because it's so old, I've had this since maybe 2015, is severely tarnished. Like, it is nowhere near the original beautiful rose gold shade that it was. It's a lot more like bronzy, and I feel like I already have bronzy shades, so I'm gonna get rid of this one. I don't even know if anyone's gonna want to buy it, honestly, but we're gonna try. And the only other thing I'm destashing from ILNP is the entire Something Sweet collection, which I think was the first spring collection of last year. It was a collection of 6 pastel shades in their speckled formula, which basically feature these like micro metallic flakies. And it's just one of my least favorite finishes from ILNP. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Again, like, the formulas are fine. They apply like other ILNP shades where they're 2 to 3 coaters depending on like the actual color. It's more so a preference thing where I just don't love these micro flakies for some reason. When it comes to speckled polishes, I think I just much prefer Cirque's speckled formula, but sadly they discontinued a lot of them, and this finish by ILNP just doesn't really do it for me, even though again the colors are super cute. Last year I really only wore these for Easter weekend, and I don't even really celebrate Easter, so it's not high on my holidays I want to to do nail art for list, and I'm pretty sure I didn't use any of them this year, so realistically I just am not going to be reaching for these again. But I do hope they put out some studio color creams in like the orange and minty colors, because I think those would be so pretty. The one I'm the most upset to get rid of is Sugar High, because it is just such a cute white crully, but I already have something similar from PPU last year, and I'd rather just destash this as a whole collection. Now moving on to my Mooncat shades, the first three that I have are from the Kaleidoscope Haze collection, and these were so hard to part with because I really loved that collection. It was just basically their first rainbow jelly flaky sort of formula, and it was just so beautiful. You know that I'm just a big fan of jellies and flaky jelly polishes. These are packed with iridescent flakies though, but with these three that I'm getting rid of, I feel like these first two shades, Flying Submarine and Magic Mushroom, kind of have like the weaker effect where the flakies are just kind of hard to spot. They don't really pop and contrast the same way that they do in the other polishes, so they are a little underwhelming because of that, especially if you were planning on wearing them as like a full mani or something. The main reason that I did want to keep this as a complete rainbow in my collection was just for the purposes of doing like rainbow nail art, but I just haven't used them that often. I just end up going back to the same kind of shades and doing lazy gradients with those. But of these three, I definitely am most upset over getting rid of Best Bud because it's a beautiful shade of green. Another jelly flaky that I have is Raaawr from the Pretty Prehistoric collection last year. This is basically the light purple version because in the original Kaleidoscope Haze, they came out with like a deeper reddy purple kind of color, which I just prefer over this one. And maybe that's crazy to say because this is definitely a cute shade of purple. Like the base color is really pretty. I think the flakies contrast really nicely. The formula is super smooth and everything. I think the only problem that people have with this shade is that it dries down matte. Like people did not like that about the Prehistoric collection, but it looks just the same with a glossy top coat. These next two polishes are from the Alice in Wonderland collab last year. This first one is Bread and Butterflies, which is the golden based magnetic polish that's packed with these iridescent flakies and this bright lime green kind of magnetic shimmer. It's definitely a busy polish, but it still has a really smooth formula, so it's another just preference thing where I do really like the shade of like gold that it is. I think it builds up so beautifully, but I just don't end up reaching for it. I also have Mad Hatter, which is another magnetic from this collection. This one is like a black base with a green magnetic shimmer and these like purple multi-chrome kind of flakies. I know people were going crazy over the shade, but it just does nothing for me. And the last collab polish that I'm getting rid of is from the Hocus Pocus 2 collection a few years ago. This is Dab of New, and it's kind of this like chartreuse green with this golden magnetic shimmer and these green flakies. I actually don't think this is an ugly polish by any means, but again, I just don't reach for it. Next up, I have another magnetic, and this is Millennia, which is basically a galaxy in a bottle, and normally I am a big fan of those types of magnetics, and I generally do really like Mooncat's magnetic specifically because I almost always find them to be super pigmented, but this one is just so incredibly sheer. I know it can easily be remedied by just layering this over a black base, but there's just other galaxy in a bottle type of magnetics that I have in my collection that I would reach for before reaching for this one. Next up, I have Pwned, which I think was from the Glitch in the Matrix collection, which I think was their very second collection after rebranding. It was really cool, and this one is definitely a unique shade to my collection because it's basically a dark charcoal gray linear holo. I really only have black linear holos like Mooncat's Cruel Mirage or Cirque's Alter Ego, and I already don't wear those enough, so I feel like I can't just justify keeping this one just because I don't have a gray. You know what I mean? This next shade should be no surprise if you remember my least favorite polishes video a while back. This is Mooncat's Bootlegger from the Midnight Rodeo collection last summer. I know a lot of people loved the browns in that release, and they just weren't the right shade of browns for me. And it really is a shame because I remember this one being described as like a whiskey brown, and it looks like it would be so cozy for the fall, but there's just a little too much yellow. This actually has like a yellow shift in more indirect lighting, and it is just not my favorite. And I'm also not a big fan of like the pearly kind of finish. The next polish I have is Dragon Scales, and this one I know is another super popular shade, but it just is not for me. I think this was previously a Live Love polish shade that they brought back in their Band of Misfits quad, which I kind of am waiting for them to do again. It's basically a black multi-chrome flaky kind of polish that is really dense, so I think you can build it up in 3 coats. Sponging it on is probably going to give you the best coverage, but since I'm just doing swatch sticks, I don't mind applying it as is. And while I have come around to enjoying multi-chromes more, this one is just in a colorway that I'm not crazy about. It's kind of this like hot pink color head on, but then in more indirect lighting it shifts to orange and yellow and even green. Next I have Spawn of Medusa, which was from the Medusa Unleashed collection a few years ago. This is in one of their micro glitter formulas that they don't really do too often anymore. I feel like a lot of brands in general are just kind of moving away from micro glitters, which is kind of sad because they are so pretty and sparkly. That being said though, this is definitely not one of my favorites. It's kind of in this like dingy olivey base color with a brighter lime green kind of shimmer going on. Definitely giving Medusa vibes, but just not the vibes for me. These next 2 shades are from one of their earlier collections called This Is Surrealism, I think. This very first one is The 13th Hour, and apologies, I thought I was recording, but I wasn't, and it's basically a black base with a very subtle blue shimmer. I just prefer Rue Morgue over this one. And the other polish I have is Con Artist, which in the bottle looks so gorgeous, like so fiery, but this one is really sheer. Definitely not up to the level of Mooncat shimmers that they put out now. Like, this is 3 coats and I feel like you can still see through it in some spots, so I'm okay parting with this one. And finally, moving on to Cirque, this first one that I have is one that I don't think I've ever shared on my channel before, but it's called Majolica. At least I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. And it is a beautiful shade. It's kind of like this dusty navy blue with this golden flaky, and I think it's pretty, but it's just one that I have never worn. As much as I love flakies and flaky filled polishes, this is one of those that I just would have preferred if it was just a cream, for example. For some reason, I just never really reach for it. So I know earlier in the video I mentioned loving Cirque's speckled formula, but I am going to be getting rid of a couple of them. The first one is Stoneware, which I have the mini bottle because it was from the advent calendar, and it's kind of this like peachy vanilla cream base with this like copper metallic microflake. Obviously I'm kind of struggling with the formula because I'm using a mini skinny brush, just the worst. But once it is built up, it looks kind of cute, but I feel like I just don't like this color on me. Or I guess it's not really the base color I have a problem with, it's the flakies. I feel like they just look a little too orange. And this next speckled polish is Calypso, and this one is especially painful because this is the specific speckled formula that I really like, where it's that super fine black micro fleck, and this one is in this soft kind of pink base that looks so pretty, but I just haven't worn this one since I bought it over a year ago. It pains me because it looks so pretty, but I just don't see myself reaching for this one. Another mini that I have is Citrine, which is from their Facets line, which was one of my favorite finishes from Cirque, but they discontinued almost all of them, I'm pretty sure. And naturally, I wanted to hold on to this one since it was missing from my collection, and then once they discontinued it, I was like, oh my gosh, well, I can't get rid of it now. But similar to the yellow and orange from Kaleidoscope Haze, it's just a color that I don't end up reaching for all too often. Don't get me wrong, it builds up to be this beautiful, deep marigold kind of color, but I feel like it's just not the right shade for me. Next, I have Storm King, which is one of their cream polishes, and I really do love Cirque's cream formulas. They are just so incredibly opaque and smooth and easy to work with. You can see just how impressive it is on the first coat alone, even with a skinny brush. I feel like that speaks volumes, and even though this is a beautiful color, it's just one that I don't end up wearing too often because I feel like it's a little too dusty for me. It's a very desaturated cornflower. And the other cream that I have is Sticky Icky, which was from a Halloween release a couple of years ago. It's kind of this like chartreuse color that is definitely very much like a putrid yellow-green. I vaguely remember not a lot of people loving this, and I was kind of surprised by that because I actually did enjoy this one. I feel like it was just the perfect Halloween slime green kind of color. But that being said, there are other lime greens in my collection that I would reach for more than this one because this one's a little too chartreuse for me. I have another Cirque green, and this one is Peridot, which was also from the Facets line, which again I was a really big fan of because they're these hollow flakies in like a jelly base, all inspired by birthstones or gemstones. And while I do love the August birthstone, and I feel like this would be so perfect to include in my upcoming August picks video, this is just another one that I don't end up reaching for just because I don't love the green shade that it is. I feel like it's a little too dingy for me. Next, I have a couple of Cirque Magnetics. These first two are from the Bubbly collection, which we don't like to talk about because that's when Cirque did their super misleading photos showing off a holographic magnetic stripe, but you tell me if you see any holo. It is quite a shame though, because especially this first shade, La Dolce Vita, is just such a beautiful rosy kind of pink. I think it's just so flattering, so pretty. And the other polish that I'm getting rid of is Aperol Spritz, which is like this warm, medium-toned orange. Another magnetic I'm getting rid of is Lynx, which was from the Heavenly Bodies collection. No surprise, this is another one of those chartreuse kind of leaning greens. I feel like you can definitely see the pattern that I just don't really love this shade of green. It's just a little too dingy and yellow leaning, especially having that golden yellow magnetic shimmer. Just not a polish that I would wear again. I somehow forgot to include a bottle clip, but this next shade is Chroma Rose, which is one of their multi-chrome polishes. And I would say this basically has a very similar color shift to Mooncat's Dragon Scales, where it's this like hot pink, fuchsia kind of color head on, but then in indirect lighting, it shifts to orange and then yellow and green in very extreme angles. And don't get me wrong, it definitely looks super cool with how shifty it is. I'm just not crazy about the color combination. And the last polish I'm destashing, at least for now, is Cirque's Time Traveler. This is another multi-chrome that has a black kind of jelly base, and this one has a really beautiful color shift that I honestly kind of forgot how pretty it was. It's this sort of blue color head on, but you can already start to see some purple on the right side of my nail, and then it shifts to pink in more extreme lighting. So this colorway is definitely way more up my alley than the last shade, for example. I just love these three shades together, and especially love that this is like a dark and moody by Pride kind of multi-chrome, but it's just one that I don't ever wear, so I don't want to just keep it just because. So that wraps up this not so little destash video. So this is technically my second one, or I guess like a part two. Part one, I would say, are the shades that I shared in my polishes I regret buying video a couple of weeks ago, since obviously I'm not planning on keeping any of those. So assuming you watched that video too, I would love to know what you think of the polishes that I'm destashing, because again, I know that they are all beautiful, like in their own ways, but I just don't really feel joy over having them in my collection anymore. They just are taking up space and realistically not shades that I would wear all too often, so I'm happy to finally get rid of them. But I guess that brings me to the whole problem about destashing, at least I consider it a problem, is just how tedious it is to do, because there are sites like Mercari or Poshmark or whatever, and I do have a Mercari page, but it just takes so long to list everything. So I think I I might list these on my Instagram DESTASH page, which I'll have linked below in the description box, just because I feel like it would be easier to do and a lot faster, less of a headache. So if you are interested in any of these or the indies that I shared in the part 1 of my regrets video, just be on the lookout for that account. I really wish there was an easier way to do this, so if you do happen to know of one, let me know. Since there are still a lot of polishes on my Mercari page, I'm probably still gonna update that one, but not like cross-post any of them. I think what's on Mercari is gonna stay over there, and then I'll just update to include any like mainstream brands, or like, I don't wanna say brands that no one really cares about, but you know, these brands I think have a lot more like popularity to them. So I imagine these would sell a lot faster than like OPI shades, for example. I definitely do plan to go through my collection again because, like I mentioned, I think in the intro, there are a lot of polishes that I am planning to destash, but I think I would rather do a video just like kind of talking about them as opposed to today's video where I'm showing all of these swatches. So let me know what you think about that, or just let me know any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.